thing. I'm going to be ready. And I'm ready for it. I was ready that time. It says you were live. I wasn't rambling about anything. I was just watching the spinny thing go. Kevin, we're live. What's up, brother?
I don't know, Doug. Sounds like you're rambling to me.
I'm always ready to ramble about some wrestling, man.
Well, then you have come to the right place, as is everyone else watching out there. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to Two Bros Wrestling Show. And tonight we are rambling about wrestling as we do on Sunday evenings. Doug, this is actually the first time I think that we're having a follow-up show, so
We
to
are
speak.
having a follow-up show. Yes.
Yeah, almost a year ago. In fact, our very second show that we ever did on the Two Bros Wrestling Show was about pandemic era wrestling and all the changes we were beginning to see. And here we are a year later, getting ready to revisit that topic. And gosh, who would have ever thought we'd be doing a second one of these, right?
Right. I mean, it's what, almost a year to the day. What was it, March 5th last year? We were in Columbus at an NXT show, or
Right.
the very last live wrestling event that we went to for quite some time.
That anybody went to. We didn't know at that time that we would be, what we were witnessing was one of the last WWE shows to take place in front of a live audience. We did know that the world obviously was changing at that time. That NXT show is always on an annual basis tied into the Arnold Classic, the fitness
Yeah.
expo in Columbus. And I don't know, Doug, I can't remember if it was like 24 hours before or 48 hours before the whole Arnold, which is a huge international deal, got canceled. And so we were wondering whether or not our NXT show would even take place because the world was beginning to shut down. We got in right under the wire for what was going to be one of the last wrestling shows of the old world, the before times, as it were.
And I think back to that night now. We are shoulder to shoulder with other wrestling fans in a very confined. I'm gonna say sold out, because if it wasn't sold out, it was damn near close, because that place was packed. We were shoulder to shoulder, with high fiving wrestlers as they come in and out. You literally you
We
can
didn't have
smell
6
them as
feet.
they walk by.
Exactly. We didn't. That is such an intimate place to see a show, which is why I love it. But now you're right. You look back, we didn't even have 6 feet between us and the wrestlers, much less the fans that we were packed in with. But we're going to delve into all of that. We watch wrestling on a weekly basis, as all you who are watching I know do as well. And it's kind of hard when you're watching week to week to notice sometimes just how far we've come between the way wrestling looked in March of last year and what it's going to look like as we're heading into March of this year. But we're going to talk about all those changes, which ones we like, which ones we don't, and who could be doing it better. And but yeah, I guess before we get that's our main event topic.
Oh, yes.
Doug, we got some news to discuss as well.
So let's hit that opening bell.
Let's do it.
Do you have the sound effect? Do you have it?
Did you not hear it?
I didn't hear
Oh, let me try that. Let me try it on you again.
it.
Did you get it that time?
No.
All right. Just go ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. And there's our opening bell.
It is the opening bell. It's February the 28th, and this is the news for the week. The big news, obviously, this week concerns the big show.
There we go.
As we now must refer to him contractually, I guess, as Paul White. But if you did not hear, fans, the news and talk of the wrestling world this week is the former Big Show, a.k.a. Paul White, has left the WWE for All Elite Wrestling. And Doug, I want your take on this, because to me, obviously, it's both big news and it's kind of, to me, meh news as well. No offense against Big Show, Paul White, great guy, big name that a lot of folks, even if you don't know wrestling, would probably know who the Big Show was. So as much as anything, it almost seems like it's just a coup for AEW to show that they could take a man who's been loyal for 22 years and turn him over to their side, because on the performance side of things and the other plans they have for him, it's not really all that exciting to me. But maybe you have a different opinion.
I really don't. I think the big thing is, and again, nothing against the Big Show, not in my Big Show is not on my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers. Let me just say that.
Sure.
He does not make the cut to hit my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers. He seems like a funny enough guy. I think he's a pretty witty guy. I think he's going to do great on commentary. I'm terrified. We're going to get to see Big Show v. Shaq probably at Revolution next week after some shenanigans this Wednesday. I don't want to see that.
No.
I think the big thing, like you say, is that Tony Khan essentially just plucked a I don't want to call him a crony, but at this point, virtually a lifelong WWE corporate man right out of there, just plucked him. I don't think Vince was doing much with him, and I'm not sure how much Tony Khan's going to do with him either, other than having him anchor a new YouTube show. What is it, Dark? I'm going to call it Dark Expanded or Dark Plus. I know that's not right, but
Elevation, and
Elevation. There we
I'm
go.
going to get to that a little bit later on myself at the end of our show.
So, but I agree with you. It's mad news, but from a performance and a entertainer, a major player, major mover, and shaker. I mean, it's not like Kazuchika Okada it is now in All Elite, but for that.
Really,
but it is big because now it says basically anybody can go anywhere at any time.
Obviously, Chris Jericho is the guy that I think from the start of AEW you think of as this is the man who made his name in WWE and who left Vince for greener pastures, or not greener, other pastures, to show that there is an option again, just like in the old days with WCW. Obviously, Jericho still has some value in the ring that Paul White doesn't. I'm not even sure that at this point Paul White is going to be what even Sting is being right now, which is more of a special attraction because for all those years, the last 3 or 4 years of WWE fans chanting "Please retire" during Big Show matches, I'm not sure anyone's really eager to see Shaq and Big Show. They weren't eager for it 8 years ago when both men were a little more athletic and younger, but we'll see. Benefit of the doubt. I
think, maybe Big Show has been held back all these years by WWE booking. He's like this super athletic big guy that he never got the shine because you're a giant. You need to wrestle like a giant. That's the good shit. Get out there and wrestle like a giant.
As far as big men go, I mean, you got to say, as far as the giants of wrestling go, he makes he looks like a Rey Mysterio compared to like an Andre or the old school Giants. So credit where it's due. He's not bad for a big man, but he is also a big man who's beyond middle age and his prime. And again, I think Tony is, I can do it. And so because I can, I will. And I think that that's kind of what he's done in this. And we all may be surprised, but it's definitely a story that after 22 years of loyalty to Vince McMahon, one of his soldiers, as it were, is now going to be going to the other team.
That is the big news. Yeah, absolutely.
Big news. And some other news, Doug. I know last time we actually had one of we were discussing last week that we've done a lot of pay-per-view centered to pro wrestling shows lately, either previews or reviews. But the last time we actually had a topic like we do tonight with our pandemic special, last time we did a topic, it was on the Impact Wrestling AEW alliance, and we got some news regarding how these as we've had a few more weeks to see how this alliance is shaking out. We kind of had our first bump in the road, the first snag, if you will, when it comes to Sammy Guevara. If you
of course we did with Sammy.
Sammy was storyline written out of the Inner Circle, and as part of that storyline gimmick, he was to be written into a angle on Impact Wrestling. And it was an angle that was written and approved, and Tony Khan signed off on it. Reportedly, it was Chris Jericho who had done the writing of it himself, and even Sammy was fine with it, apparently, until he got to Nashville for the tapings, and that's when things went downhill fast. Sammy started having his own ideas about what he thought he should be doing, and obviously on a day of a taping is not a great time to be making changes to a script. So they just sent him home. They just said, forget it. And, this could obviously be one of those things that fans might worry could sour the relationship. But all reports are that other than some possible heat on Sammy himself, that the Impact and AEW crew were able to smooth things over amongst each other, and no one is holding anything against either company. They're both supposedly still excited about the way this has all been playing out, and that they were going to continue. Obviously, Sammy is not going to be continuing in that role. It should be interesting to see what, if anything, is done with Sammy back on AEW television now that he kind of went into business for himself there for a bit. Because it's not his first controversy, Doug.
It is not. His Sasha Banks comments, him almost killing Matt Hardy a couple of times.
So,
and now this. I mean, I really like Sammy as a performer and entertainer. Even his vlog on YouTube is very entertaining. But the kid can't seem to stay out of trouble.
He can't stay out of his own way. But I am glad, though, that it is not souring the relationship, because that is going swimmingly. And you kind of hinted on it earlier, but I was going to talk about the fact, too, in the news that, as we've seen with Kenta appearing a couple of times now on AEW Dynamite, the alliance, since we last spoke about it, has expanded. And now not only includes Impact, and it should be noted to some extent, I guess, with Thunder Rosa and some of the other folks, NWA has had a working relationship as well with AEW, but New Japan Pro Wrestling obviously has some open doors now, and supposedly we have some more of that to come, and it involves not just AEW being aligned. Apparently these are like triangular alliances where everyone in this partnership benefits, because last week on Impact Wrestling we saw the debut of Juice Robinson and David Finlay, who are former tag team champs in New Japan. So New Japan talent is already appearing on Impact. And Doug, you hinted at it earlier, supposedly the biggie is coming to both Impact and AEW. You'll see him on Dynamite and Impact both. And that's Kazuchika Okada. And as anyone who follows New Japan knows, Doug, we're looking at one of the best wrestlers in the world.
Yes, we are, without a doubt.
And so that's exciting, because a lot of American fans probably haven't had the same exposure, unless they are the hardcore marks that subscribe to everything and follow his Japanese work. He had a cup of coffee in Impact Wrestling years ago.
Say, you might remember him from way back in Impact.
And if you do, please forget everything you saw from that, because he was not treated as the big deal that he is, and certainly is at this time. His reputation he's made since that stint a decade ago has been as one of the world's best wrestlers. And Dave Meltzer himself is basically saying that it's a done deal. Okada's coming to both Dynamite and as well as Impact on Tuesday night. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see how he works him in. But my goodness, the potential there of American audiences getting Omega Okada as we saw in New Japan. Give me another round of that in front of American crowd, and I think that the world is in for a great surprise if you're only following American wrestling and don't know what those two men have done historically together. In other news, Doug, we do have some non-WWE, non-alliance news. Let's talk about the other group of wrestling talent, and that is being obviously the gorilla still, and that is WWE. I guess just flexing to show that, okay, all you guys can align against us, but we are still the gorilla in the room. They've signed everybody. I don't know if you got your contract in the mail or not, Doug, but
I'm just waiting. Vince is just waiting until I'm medically cleared again. So
that may be a while.
Yes,
This week saw the largest class ever to report to the WWE Performance Center. They signed more female talent than they've ever signed before, as well as a lot of male talent too. And a lot of these folks aren't just young athletes or prospects. A lot of these folks have name value that a lot of fans will recognize. And some of these, even main eventers that folks are going to know are like John Morrison's wife, Taya Valkyrie, who will obviously be getting a new name, not just because she's going to WWE, but because WWE already has a Aoife Valkyrie in NXT UK. The former NWA World Champion and former Impact Champion as well. I'm sorry, he was an NWA National Champion and an Impact World Champion, but Eli Drake, now known as LA Knight because phonetically you can still say it the same way. He's already made an appearance on NXT television, so obviously big things are planned for him. And then you have Priscilla Kelly, also who shown up now on as part of this huge class. And as far as those that don't have national TV experience, that might be names to watch. But the son of Rick Steiner, who is apparently quite the prospect on his own terms, is amongst this class. So WWE making a lot of moves too. Interesting considering how many people they've let go over the last year that they would be bringing in such a robust class into the Performance Center right now.
And they also brought in that kid that looks like a Brock Lesnar clone, the football player.
Yes.
I forgot his name, but I mean, that kid looks like, he was dug out of Lesnar's DNA and hatched in some lab somewhere.
And honestly, if you get a young, motivated athlete who could be a fraction of what the young Brock Lesnar was, Vince obviously would be seeing dollar signs there, and would make sense why you'd sign some talent like that. But yeah, a lot of folks moving into the Performance Center, so we're probably about to see a whole lot of changeover on NXT. We got some injury news.
People are just going to sit around and be paid to show up and hang out in catering just so Tony Khan can't pick them up. Because I think we're back to that suddenly.
If we got Big Show being signed because Tony can, then Vince may be taking folks off the market because he can too. And honestly, I don't know that isn't good for wrestling, because I think the best days of wrestling, and most fans would agree, is when there has been adequate competition and not a distant second, but someone right on Vince's heels has made the WWE product better. I think NXT, which has always been good, in fairness, I'm not going to say NXT has never experienced some of the dips we've seen on the main roster, but I think that NXT has gotten significantly better running Wednesday nights against AEW. So I think that both rosters are bringing out the best in each other. So I'm excited that we're seeing these alliances and things form, and Vince bringing in all this talent and starting up new divisions in different countries. It's more wrestling for us to keep up with, but more wrestling, as long as it's of quality, is a good thing.
I can't even keep up with the wrestling we're supposed to keep up with right now. We need like 17 bros for this show at this point.
Well, then you're not going to like this next bit of news, Doug, but the reports are that there's a new NXT show that is in the works. NXT Evolve might be a new NXT series starting up soon. Apparently, a pilot was shot back in December with Evolve mastermind Dave Sapolsky, and then most folks would remember him from his long stint with TNA, but Jeremy Borash. The two of those together were, doing this show, the writing and the producing. It's supposedly different than anything that's currently going on in WWE. It's grittier with shoot-like presentation. Hopefully not like a Raw Underground when you read that, that worries me there. But I trust Dave and Borash, if they're left to their own devices, well below the Vince McMahon radar, that it might stand a better chance. But again, they're signing all this talent. They have more talent, like you said. They're sitting around almost. So the fact that there would be a second NXT brand would make sense. Obviously, this pilot was shot, but when it airs, who knows if it will ever make it to air. But stay tuned for that, and we'll keep you informed on whether or not there's more wrestling for you all to tune in for there. Two more bits of news. One is Anna Jay unfortunately received some bad news. Anna Jay has really been getting a lot of spotlight since her alliance with the Dark Order, and definitely the female talent from the Dark Order that everyone has been focused on. Honestly, she's almost a de facto leader of that group now since the passing of Brody Lee. No offense to -1, but Anna separated her shoulder, and it's a very serious injury. Obviously, it would not affect her on-screen role. And if anything, they might dial that up a little bit more to keep her featured. But she could be out for as long as a year with this injury. So our best to Anna Jay for a quick recovery. And then the final news, Doug, and I'll save this for last just because I think it's going to transition well into what we're getting ready to talk about. But the NWA online store has been under construction. I went and just a week ago and checked and on something I've been keeping an eye on, and suddenly the whole store was gone. I thought, well, that's strange, but website under construction doesn't seem like out of the realm of possibility. But going on a week, I'm like, okay, that's odd. Then over the weekend, all of the NWA's videos on their YouTube channel were pulled, and so rumors began running rampant. And supposedly today, the NWA has sent out some feelers to some reporters saying, we got an announcement coming soon, and it's positive. And reportedly, it's over some TV taping. So there was great fear, though, with all those other signs that maybe things weren't so good in the world of the National Wrestling Alliance. I'm ready to move to the main event, Doug, because I think that the transition there is the NWA, as much as any organization, when we're getting ready to talk organization by organization, how they've been dealing with the pandemic, I think it's without question the National Wrestling Alliance has taken the hardest hit.
I would agree with that because I mean, the NWA Power was a great show. It had that great old school feel. Anytime I watched it, I was like, I am like 8 years old again watching Jim Crockett product here. But that was a very smaller than an Impact Zone kind of setup where you had, but you had a live audience in there.
Well, and all that was pre-pandemic. So What we're talking about tonight is how far we've come in the last year. And, as we teased on our social channels this week, I mean, we've gone from no fans to virtual fans. Some are doing distance fans. So there's a difference in no fans, empty arenas, and almost everybody at this point now, though, is doing something. And the NWA weren't. The NWA is the only organization that never really got back to production. And because they had the longest layoff, a lot of their top tier talent, even the folks that were holding titles, have, instead of setting out, have been allowed to leave to void their contracts and have gone elsewhere. Ricky Starks, Eli Drake, Zicky Dice, James Storm. What was the former women's champion of the NWA? No, it's Allison Kay. I mean, just a lot of the again, you were saying small little show, really great old school feel, but a lot of the top tier talent are already gone.
Yeah, Stu. Oh gosh,
Grayson.
Yeah, Stu Grayson. Thank you. I was going to call him Stu Barrett, but that's not right.
Wade Barrett. You're right.
They had an attempt there where they shifted from the NWA Power to just keep talent and keep themselves out there on the radar by shifting over and doing like almost this I don't know, David Lynchian variety show that was Carneyland, but that didn't really. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it seemed to go south, and I'm not even sure what happened to Carneyland at this point. But I think that's the only thing that they really tried to continue to put out there.
Yeah, and that's it. When you go back, we're looking back to tomorrow's March 1st, and the first coronavirus cases were December 2019. We started seeing them in America in the early part of 2020. But really, if you wanted to put a line in the sand, it was March. When the world started to shut down, and that included the world of professional wrestling as well. And we did, like we mentioned earlier, our very second show was on this topic a year ago when we started this, and we were talking at the time about the things that we liked and didn't like with the way folks were presenting. If you recall, there at first, WWE was showing their pay-per-view matches to stretch out Raw. So they'd only film an hour worth of Raw, and then they'd show you the main event of the most recent pay-per-view, which would be 45 minutes of airtime. And you do that with some backstage packages, and you got yourself a 3-hour Raw with only an hour's worth of original content on it. It's obvious that at first people didn't know what to do, so they almost thought that it seemed like they were going to have this stretch period where we can, this isn't going to last how long it's lasted. But at first, once they realized, okay, this is something we all need to deal with, everyone went to, well, we'll just have it without fans. And maybe that's where we start, Doug. There actually are still some promotions they're going with the no fans approach. AEW and WWE very quickly moved on from that. But there are some companies still producing studio only content. Noticeably Impact Wrestling, when they were for a period shut down. They, just like the NWA and Ring of Honor, MLW, shut down. AEW, WWE pretty much found ways to keep going. Everyone else pretty much shut down. Impact, when they started though, and they still are filming only in a small studio with no one in the crowd. They only recently added the fan noise, the piped in fan noise, which, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Doug. I believe the first instance of that was during WWE's greatest wrestling match ever, when they did, they piped in the noise, and you and I were on here debating as to what we thought about it, and now pretty much everyone's doing that. What do you think about it now?
I think it's come a long way. I'm not, a sports ball kind of guy, but my father-in-law definitely is. Now I've been at the in-laws' house when I've seen like major league sports. I guess that's a thing. The big boys with their sports balls. Where they do something very similar, and I think maybe WWE has taken cues from the major sports, because going back to those first weeks of piped in fan noise, it just seemed like they would just got picked up a sound effects CD of crowd and just pushed the faders up. But now they've gotten a lot better at hitting cues, and I mean, it is a scripted sports event, so they know when the spots are coming, and there's a lot of post edit they can do. So I think they've gotten a lot better, and it also forces the audience at home now to it's easier to get folks over, in that you're going to have an entire arena cheering for who you, the booker, want people to cheer for. I think that is something that very much benefits WWE, where they can, I think for a long time now they've gone away from organically creating superstars to saying, this guy's a superstar, you'll cheer for him, you'll boo for this guy, and that's backfired for him in the past. But when you control the audience, you can control who's booing and who's cheering, and make those things that maybe you and I are going to face palm over. People are going to boo and cheer appropriately as intended now, at least in the confines of a piped in crowd.
And when we first had our our first pandemic show, one of the things you and I discussed as being an obvious negative was the lack of energy in the building, leading to a lack of what seems to be urgency in the ring. It just seems slower. It seemed to have less consequences because it was so darn quiet. It just didn't seem right. Then, of course, because we're, can't be satisfied. But no, when they started popping in the noise, it was the opposite. Like, okay, they're doing this. This is opposite. This is awesome chants that are obviously piped in. It also didn't seem organic. They're finding a little bit more of the sweet spot. I honestly don't pay as much attention to it anymore, which is probably a good thing, because when there was no noise at all, I was very aware of it. And then when they started piping in the noise, the first couple of times I saw that, I'm like, man, that really sticks out like a sore thumb. But maybe they've just trained us. I do think that, considering the circumstances, it's a pretty decent compromise.
It's absolutely I mean, it's the best of a bad situation, which is what everybody's done in the past years, trying to make the best of a bad situation. I mean, it certainly helps having professional wrestling deemed as an essential business, which I still think is ridiculous. But it has benefited both the WWE and AEW, as we've got the Performance Center located in Florida, and AEW basically can play in Tony Khan's backyard there at the Jaguar Stadium there in Daly's place, their amphitheater. So it worked out for both, the two major players.
While we're talking, though, about those that are still going without fans, such as Impact, and I want to mention that Ring of Honor is not only going without fans, they are going without any sound piped in either. They're doing it in a larger arena, not a smaller studio, and they just keep the arena darkened and no piped in noise. And I have to say that when everybody was doing it, it did seem odd because we were so used to crowds and interaction. Now that everyone's doing the crowd sweetening, I think Ring of Honor stands out by the fact that they don't. And they really rely heavily now on their pure matches. When you and I had our first show on the COVID-19 era wrestling, we talked about one of the things that we predicted would stay around for a while would be the more reliance on vocalization. And because they have these pure matches where they try to treat it like a chess match, like it's a real intense sporting event, they have slower action, a lot of mat work, and a lot of talking back and forth between the wrestlers, real specific instructions from the referee. The last pure match I saw on TV, he disallowed a tag in a tag match because somebody wasn't holding the rope. I'm thinking, who does that anymore? And he was admonishing the guys. But I mean,
FTR does.
Yeah. I think that right now, trying to stand out, the fact that they're the only ones still doing it in dead silence, and they're using that silence as an asset instead of a detraction, is making them stand out, and is actually a good thing in this instance. But that's the way that they're handling it currently. NXT UK was doing something similar in that they didn't have any piped in noise and they didn't have a crowd. They were off for a very long time. They've only started back about 2 months ago, but they did so in a studio that Triple H helped acquire and set up, and it's basically their performance center now that they're having over in the United Kingdom. And so I believe it's going to be where they continue having shows even once crowds are let back in. However, they have finally, I mean, state-of-the-art studio, but I think they realized that they needed the piped-in noise because they've recently started piping in noise and putting a few faces of their fans on their screens. But when I say it's like Thunderdome Light, I'm talking 20, 30 people max on either sides of a really small entrance area. But it still gives the impression that there's, eyes on the performances going on.
I think early on, one of the better things, better than the actual piped in noise, was what AEW did, where you could have actual, fans at ringside, even if it was just like, talent out there. You have your lower and mid card talent out there, but I think that was a good. It had that. You still had that people are going to cheer for who they're supposed to cheer for, because again, it's scripted. Yeah. So. But you've got baby faces cheering for baby faces and heels cheering for heels, which is kind of interesting. But you at least have like a live dynamic, and what we talked about before about how it's rough to get the crowd going, and because they're performers at the end of the day. All these people are tremendous athletes, but they are performers at heart, and they have been trained for years at their craft to feed off the audience, and they didn't have that. But at least putting some live people in and around the ring, even if it were their peers, they have a little bit of something to feed off of then.
Well, it's probably worth pointing out too that WWE was doing something very similar when they were at the Performance Center, except they didn't have the delineation of having the good guys cheer the good guys and the bad guys. They just had students at ringside that were just scripted to act one way or the other, with no real alliance as to what their actual characters were. They never hardly acknowledged that these were wrestlers and not fans at ringside. WWE got away from that, and maybe that's the next category we go to, because I guess I should mention MLW is also filming in the same spot that they used to film in. They're back in this club, as it were, is what it looks like, and except just without fans, and again with the sweetening of piped in crowd noise. New Japan has a United States broadcast, a U.S. dojo, and that is also done in a small studio without fans. But the other category I was getting ready to pivot to is virtual fans, and that's where because we were just saying how WWE had the Performance Center students there. Well, for Raw and SmackDown now we have the Thunderdome, which is basically LED screens that they set up in an arena, and they went from the arena now to a Major League Baseball park, which I guess they're going to have to find a new place to move to pretty soon, because that ballpark's going to be occupied here in about 3 weeks when the Tampa Bay Rays start playing their games again. But Doug, the Thunderdome concept, I mean, WWE pioneered this. I think it looks great. It might be one of my favorite approaches. They mix it in with the vocal sweetening. I like it, actually. For what it is, I think it works.
The sci-fi geek in me loves it and also finds it incredibly disturbing because I've referred to it many times as like some sort of dystopian tribunal, where people could be piped in from all across the world to basically sit in judgment. But that's basically what we're doing anytime we tune in to watch wrestling anyway. Entertain us or don't entertain us. Yeah, I do like it. I find it slightly disturbing again from the sci-fi geek in me that sees it as a dystopian tribunal, but I really do like it. And I agree, it does look really cool. It's a little off-putting at first,
Yeah.
Almost like having like the fake cardboard cutout. People in the stands, kind of a thing. But yeah, I do like it. I think it's a great concept, and
that is definitely making lemons out of lemonade in my mind. At first it does kind of like that. Look at that. It looks impressive. And so first I was concentrating on how amazing technologically it looked.
yes.
And then after a while, I stopped paying attention to it. It became a fabric of the background of the show, but it definitely looks better than empty seats or just a blank wall. So yeah, I kind of like it too. When they first started it, I actually tried to get on there a time or two, signed up, and I kind of given up on that because I rarely start watching the shows on time. I'm usually watching 20 minutes later on DVR, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to sit here in front of my computer screen. I'll watch on the big screen. But yeah, I kind of like it. NXT, I think, is kind of interesting that they sort of took a hybrid approach. They took their Thunderdome concept that they do for Raw, SmackDown, and pay-per-views, and they scaled it down to the new the new arena that they redid there, the Performance Center, and you have a hybrid of screens and actual fans now at ringside. If you're watching NXT, I think you lose a little bit of that Thunderdome concept because I think what makes it look so cool on Raw, SmackDown, and the pay-per-views is the three-dimensional look of people in seats moving backwards. And at NXT, they're just flat on the screen, so that looks a little strange to me. But the folks at ringside are actual paid fans that they are, not social distance, but they are masked, and they obviously are at a certain capacity that they're keeping down. So they kind of went with a hybrid approach, and I'm fine for that one too, because I do think the fact that these are real fans giving real reactions at ringside is definitely a benefit to the in-ring product.
Yeah, and we got AEW who lets fans in again now. I don't think there are actually any fans down around the ring. It seems like they're scattered about through Daly's place. But when I was watching this week, I was really questioning how much audience sweetening was going on, because there was quite a bit of pop for the amount of. It's something you probably don't really register, but I don't even remember what the spot was or what it was. But I was thinking that's too big of a reaction for the amount of people in Daly's place.
So that was the last category I was going to, is the actual fans, like not the hybrid approach of the Thunderdome and the virtual fans and a few actual fans. AEW was the first in America, in fairness, New Japan's been doing it, to have actual socially distanced fans in the crowd. What's interesting about that, and you were hitting on some of it, because I think that slowly they are changing it a bit. But at first, it was these socially distanced fans that were spread throughout the arena. To be honest, I preferred the virtual fans in WWE, because I'm sure it's great to actually be able to be out again and seeing something live. Sure. It's great for the people in the building, but you never, unless the cameraman was out in the middle of the outfield, sitting there with a camera on these fans, you never saw them, because like you said, the folks at ringside aren't fans. The folks you see at ringside are wrestlers. The folks that are fans that have paid are scattered so far out, the camera never picks them up unless there's a camera out in the crowd specifically to shoot that individual, which to me always just looked weird. The only reactions you could really hear from down by the ring were the scripted reactions of the wrestlers. ringside. And, again, I'm sure it's great to be there, but I think they might have realized also that this was not, it was good for selling a few tickets, but it wasn't really adding to the TV presentation because the folks were too far away to hear and too far away to see. So I do believe you are right. I noticed it myself this last week that not only did the crowd reaction seem louder than normal, they didn't show fans in the actual crowd. They showed fans that once set at ringside looked like wrestlers that I recognized. On the other side, it looked like people who were obviously not professional wrestlers. So I'm wondering if they decided to let a few more people around ringside and forget about putting people up in the bleacher seats, because they never put a camera out that way. And whenever you happen to get something that wasn't the hard camera that would pan in that direction, I saw no one. But you'd hear this big reaction and just look like a sea of empty seats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just the audio engineer in me in my ears perked up. I was like, wait, what I'm seeing and what I've seen are like shots in that arena today of who's there and what, just because I think it does look bad on the product when you do get shots. I mean, I understand why it's happening, but there's still this mentality of like, where is everybody? You still think that in the back of your head. Why can't they fill an arena? Why can't they fill this amphitheater? Why is it so sparse? Well, it's sparse because there's a global pandemic, but that's not where your brain goes first. But to see what they do show, and then to hear the reactions that I was hearing this week, is like something's not right there.
Yeah, that's why in some ways, like the hybrid approach of NXT and the socially distanced fans of AEW, it's great that people are getting to see wrestling again, but I almost think that at least with the virtual audience of the Thunderdome, what you see and what you hear, like we know it's piped in noise and these fans are all in front of their laptops. It looks cool and it's better than, empty arena. I think that still, to me, looks and sounds more natural than, five guys way out in the bleachers that you don't see and the wrestlers at ringside. And so I think maybe AEW might be starting to evolve their product based on just this last week was the first time I noticed it. So the fact that you picked up on it too makes me think, okay, I haven't just been missing it. If your ears perked up this week, it's probably something that's brand new, because it's also been reported that when you're having an event at the same location every week and people can't get there because of travel restrictions, and it is a touristy area, you're having to count on locals filling up a building every week. Rumors were that they were having a very hard time moving tickets.
Yeah.
So that might be another reason why they maybe have decided just to bring a smaller group of people into the daily space and just put them at ringside, as opposed to trying to fill up enough of this monstrous arena to even look, like you said, it just visually doesn't look right. Your mind still goes there, even if you know why. There's not that many people there.
Yeah, exactly. It still goes there because, again, we've been programmed for, honestly, almost 50 years at this point. We have been programmed to react and recognize wrestling in very certain ways. And, a year does not take away from a year of reality does not take away from all this programming that we have. So I think a lot of times our first reaction is why is this product bad? Why is nobody here? Well, no, this product is good, but there's a global pandemic and this just looks weird. The brain adjusts and goes on. But, that thought process, at least for me, is shooting through my head along with like wizards and spaceships and other wackiness that's going on. But
so gun to your head, I think I've already given my opinion. But if you had to pick with the approaches we've talked about, there's still folks that are doing it empty arena. There's folks that are doing it virtual. And then there's folks that are doing it socially distanced. Of those three approaches, which is working best for you visually on TV, the way it looks?
I hate to say this, but visually, I really do think the Thunderdome wins there, just because you don't have an empty arena look. The hybrid, I think, is good, where you have, what AEW does is good, and they have people there in the arena, whether it's talent or locals that have come in for the show or whatever, or the Young Bucks parents. So at ringside. You have folks there, but visually, just on a visual presentation, I think WWE has definitely won that because they were able to throw money and technology and create this again dystopian tribunal that they've created where we have all these all-seeing eyes of the internet which is basically what wrestling is anymore anyway. We have the internet and the all-seeing eyes of that focused on it. It almost gets a little bit meta at that point.
I kind of agree with you. I definitely think that the Thunderdome does it best for me, but I do like what they've done at Daly's Place, where you see the big stage, so that detracts from the fact that
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't detract from the fact that you're not looking at the arena itself. The way that they framed it looks good. Overall, we're a mile from where we started at the beginning of this thing, when everyone was, you could hear a pin drop, and you were looking at empty chairs, and you were showing lots of replays. I mean, those are things that kind of went by the wayside as everyone learned. They are all doing their best, and I respect the fact that we should mention that when you can't tour, obviously the talent is not making the same amount of money they would have been this time last year, particularly indie talent or those that work indie shows,
Right.
and then might work an Impact or AEW taping from time to time. We're not talking about people on a WWE schedule, but these folks that are out having to make their own money, they don't have those venues anymore. And then, WWE can absorb the cost. Tony Khan can absorb the cost. But let's also give props to however, you're going about doing it. Keeping a COVID era production on the air for all the precautions and cleaning and testing and everything that these folks have to do, it's got to be extremely cost prohibitive for an Impact, an ROH, an MLW, these small guys to get back just on a weekly basis. Those episodes have to be so much more expensive than they would have been normally.
Yeah, and when we do look at we have two billionaires running wrestling companies that have been able to keep the wrestling companies going through all this. I don't think anybody else in any other productions we talk about, any other wrestling companies, actually has somebody which they can claim to be a legitimate billionaire as an owner of them. But we have two billionaires basically playing with all their wrestling toys.
And so kudos to everyone else that's figured out a way to get back on the air.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, folks, buy a shirt, buy a DVD, something to support these individuals that are definitely have learned, as we all have over the last year, how to keep going on. Because this week we reached that grim milestone of 500,000 coronavirus deaths just in this country. Obviously, entertainment is nothing compared to the lives and the cost, the human costs of this pandemic, but financially, we all make living, and you have to make a living. And professional wrestlers and professional wrestling companies, this is how they make their living. So, kudos to them, all of them, for whatever path they took to get back on the air, to entertain us, to give us something to do when we've had a whole lot less to do overall over the past year. And Doug, before we go to the big finish and drop this topic completely out, I will say I think in my mind, we've covered all the different approaches that everyone's taking. But, I went back and looked at our first one just to see how far it came from the things we were saying would probably be with us forever. The vocalization, all of that that I think to some extent that has continued. Maybe less so because of the vocal sweetening. Maybe you don't need as much chatter as they were doing at the beginning. But I think that's definitely something you see more of now than you would have 4 or 5 years ago. I am happy to say, though, we were mercifully wrong when it came to something we thought was with us to stay. Cinematic wrestling. I guess you and I, we maybe underestimated the fact that wrestling would take a good thing and run it into the ground as they evolve. If it works once, it'll work 1,000 times.
Yeah, we should have known.
they burned out on that quickly. The Boneyard match and the John Cena Bray Wyatt match at WrestleMania were both pretty well received. And then of course AEW follows that up by doing their stadium brawl thing. But very quickly after that, there were so many of these things that. I mean, those are the three I remember, and they were the first three. And after that, everything else is kind of a blur. And I think, AEW did a couple more. I can't even remember what they were. I remember a really bad Velveteen Dream Adam Cole NXT match that really would have benefited from just being an actual match instead of whatever the heck it was playing around on a movie set or something. I mean, it got so ridiculous. Fortunately, I think they realized after so much Bray Wyatt ridiculousness and with all those horror show matches that it died a merciful death, and we're I think done with cinematic wrestling.
Yeah.
At least as an ongoing. They'll bring it back, but I mean,
Yeah,
it's not going to be.
it will not die, but I thought we'd walked away from barbed wire exploding death matches in the 90s too, but
Everything comes back, right?
right?
So, Doug, I don't know if you're ready to go to the big finish, but before
Let's
we
do it.
think the main event, I will say, let's hope that this is the last of these. Let's not have to do a third one of these a year from now. What do you say?
I am all for that. I saw earlier today that Johnson and Johnson's not injection, their vaccine has been approved for emergency use, and it's just one injection. So, the tools to fight are out there. We just have to stay apart, get vaccinated, wear masks, and weather through this, and we'll see those numbers start to come down.
And hopefully the Two Bros Wrestling Show won't have to talk about how the product has evolved in the COVID era of wrestling, because we'll be beyond it in another year. But we would have thought that last year. So fingers crossed, guys.
Right. I would like to get to some live remotes outside of, wrestling shows before we go in and do things like that.
Yep.
Or at least see some local indie shows around here. I mean, there's a lot of very local folks who, like you said, don't have the benefit of even the ROHs or the NWAs. There's a lot of local talent that would love to make it to the NWA or the ROH that, are wrestling in legitimate bingo halls, which haven't been able to in over a year now.
And obviously New Japan's got fans back in the building. There's a plan for fans at WrestleMania. Major League Baseball is getting ready to start back up. A lot of teams are putting fans in the stands, so we are on the path back. And so let's hope we don't do another one of these, because for as good as they are doing it, I would love it for the day that they don't need to pipe in noises or pipe in images of fans. Let's get you and I back at an NXT show together. What do you say?
Let's do it. Let's get this big finish. Let me pop it up again. There we go. Big finish for real this time.
You want to go? Let's go embarrassment or botch of the week, as we now call it.
So the botch of the week, I'm thinking overall, and I'm going to call AEW out on this, because they've had these this lengthy women's tournament, but they've had a hard time finding any time for them on actual TV. I mean, a lot of this stuff has been happening on their YouTube channels. Right before this went live, I was watching, the Japanese version of some of this. I don't know if it's AEW Dark. I don't even know what to call it. Which I am the AEW fanboy, but
AEW Women's Eliminator Tournament, I think is what they're called.
Yeah. So I was watching some of that. It was a tag match in the Japanese version of it, which was a throwback for me, because I thought it was kind of appropriate. That I think what the first no fans show I actually saw was a Stardom show that they did on YouTube with all the ladies from Stardom out of Japan, and I thought it was the most bizarre but most interesting thing I had ever seen, because there were no fans, but these girls were just going at it, and that's kind of what I was watching right before it came on. But AEW has got to do better with their women's talent. I mean, they're so important, but you can't find time for them on TV other than to get, a Nyla Rose and Britt Baker on TV, or a Thunder Rosa here or there, which are great talents, but, I expect better from AEW all around.
There's a great Aja Kong match on, if you didn't get to that part yet, but I can't remember who it is. She's facing another talent that I remember from New Japan, and they absolutely had one. It was very close to being my match of the week, but it was buried on this, like you said, not even time to put it on the main show. No one your general audience for AEW would never even know that the match happened. Which
I consider myself a wrestling mark from way back anyway. But right now I find it hard to consume all the wrestling that I feel I need to. And for me to have to go and look for it, a lot of people aren't going to do that. I don't have the time to do it. A lot of other people aren't going to care to do it. But I think that it could be much better to give like that Aja Kong. Maybe nobody knows who Aja Kong is in the States, but you put her on national TV and people are going to learn. People are going to watch and go, "Oh shit, that was awesome!"
She may have had one of the better matches I saw this past week, and how many people actually saw it. It's related to my botch of the week. It's not geared on the women's division, but mine goes back to our main story, not the main story, the main event story, but in our headlines about Paul White coming to AEW. Mm-hmm. He is going to be not just an on-screen wrestling talent. He's going to be a behind the microphone commentator on the new show AEW Dark Elevation. And so my botch of the week is AEW Dark Elevation. I am that Mark who doesn't have time, but yet feels like I need to watch all the wrestling that I can possibly consume, not just for this show, but because I am a wrestling Mark. AEW Dark is a great idea. The idea that they have when they promote AEW Dark is it's a chance to get talent on air that they couldn't get on Wednesday nights. It's a chance to highlight independent talent. It's a chance to highlight folks who are learning their craft. And all of that I'm in support of. You'd think by that description it would be NXT-like. It is not. AEW Dark is, and I watch it almost every week because I have to. And it's a slog. And so when you hear that,
2 hours now?
Do what now?
Is it about 2 hours now? Dark?
The last episode was 2 hours and 14 minutes of primarily squash matches. I'd be fine if they were competitive matches. If it was even nobody, no name versus no name. But in general, it's you'll get SCU against two guys whose records are 0-8. So it's like watching old school wrestling in the 70s and 80s when it was just all squash matches and interviews, which worked back then, and we all loved it. That's the era we came up on. But you just can't do that for 2 hours. You could do it for 40 minutes and be fine with it. AEW Dark started as, we'd film one match before Dynamite. We'd film the second match, film it after Dynamite. We put those two 15-minute segments together with an interview. We got a 30-minute, 40-minute show. That was fine. 2 hours is long. Adding a third, which is, again, AEW Dark Elevation has the exact same description as AEW Dark. So they're missing the ball already for 2 hours, and now they're adding a third hour, which, again, just does not fill me with much excitement, and I will watch it. And so now it kind of fills me with dread that I have to watch it. Tony Khan will say this is not the AEW show that he says is coming. He said that there is yet another show, what will be a fourth show that will be on TNT. So they'll have 2 YouTube shows and 2 TNT shows. Maybe that will help spread out the town a little bit more and maybe help them. I think once they're back to touring and things like that, maybe AEW Dark and by extension AEW Dark Elevation will start to mean more and look better. But right now, Dark is just again, it's a slog to get through, and just I can't get excited about a whole new hour of that coming.
I think as far as as AEW's like YouTube shows, they really have 3, because I think you really have to include BTE in there, because I think BTE does a lot better getting talent over than Dark does. Because I think if not for BTE, the Dark Order would not be over the way they are.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, de facto maybe, but I mean that's the Bucks and the Elite. Tony and AEW is benefiting from that. They should let those guys book Dark, see what it turns into.
Yes, absolutely.
You want to go to match or performer? I'm fine with either one.
I don't really have a match, but I am going to shout out whoever put together that Papa Buck, and I don't know who did this, the Papa Buck segment where because I thought it was just framed great, where you've got Jericho MJF beating down Papa Buck, and just to frame it, even though it was incredibly obvious for me watching it from like a TV production, but incredibly obvious when but the way the placement where they've got Papa Buck all beat up and the blood on one side and then the blood on the other side, I'm like, this is great storytelling, even from a wrestling perspective, great storytelling, because it sets up, it makes it a little bit more intense and everything, as far as like now you have a blood feud, and it just overall looked great. But as far as a match of the week, I got nothing this week. But I didn't get to watch all my wrestling yet, so
I'll go match and then I'll go performer. Match of the week for me was AEW, their headline match this past week. If you haven't got to the main event yet, Doug, I know you'll get to at least you'll watch your AEW.
I fell asleep during it, not because it was a bad match, because it's been a long week for Doug.
Yeah. Lance Archer versus Ray Phoenix, though. This match was fantastic. Big man, little man matchup, but Lance Archer's not your average big man. He did the walk the rope spot, like the old Spoiler used to do, and then after Spoiler, Undertaker made it real popular. But neither of those guys walked the entire length of the rope and then got about to the one turnbuckle and did a moonsault back onto Ray Phoenix. I mean, that's the kind of athlete that Lance Archer is. Of course, Ray Phoenix. The only thing I hate about the match is that one of them had to lose, and honestly, both of them could use the win. Ray Phoenix really needs to be positioned as a main eventer. I think he's ready for to be the modern Rey Mysterio, give him a solo run. And Lance Archer, after a hot run coming in, we've complained on here before how they cooled him down in a way that didn't make sense. So they both needed to win. That was the only bad thing about the match, but the match itself, absolutely fantastic. And then my performer of the week, Cameron Grimes. I love me some Cameron Grimes. I never knew in my life, and I know, Doug, you're behind the wrestling, so this may be new to you, but if you haven't seen Cameron lately, Cameron has made some money off of GameStop. Oh, my gosh. One, he's hilarious anyway. And I never knew that I needed the hillbilly $1 million man in my life, but we all did. So this past week on NXT, if you didn't see it, and I know, Doug, this was including you, but if folks at home didn't see it, tune in, because Cameron Grimes took his newly won millions and decided by watching old $1 Million Man tapes, he was going to do the old $1 Million Man bit around the Performance Center, where he took the basketball and was going to, I'll give you $1,000 if you dribble it 10 times. And so the first person, he comes to dribbles it 10 times, and he has to pay him the $1,000 because he saw the concept. He didn't finish watching the whole segment of $1 Million Man to realize that, oh yeah, so he's already out 1,000. And so he tries it again, except this time he approaches a female recruit at the Performance Center who apparently in real life has come over from the WNBA. So when it gets to be about 10, when he's ready to kick the ball, she does something behind the back, between the legs move thing, and he just falls flat on his tail, and so he's out another $1,000. So now he's irritated because the $1 Million Man is not smarter than Cameron Grimes. So third guy he goes up to, $1,000 if you can dribble the ball 10 times. The guy dribbles the ball once, and Cameron just punches him in the face. It was ridiculous and hilarious at the same time. And what made it so is that Cameron was just so committed to I'm just going for it. Hillbilly $1 Million Man gimmick. I hope we see more of it.
Excellent. I will put that on my catch-up list.
And that, Doug, is the Two Bros Wrestling Show for this week. And again, let's hope that we don't have to do another pandemic special. But next week we do have.
Next week, we need to talk about next week. We need to talk about next week off the air.
Okay, I'm going to tell you guys.
we may need to adjust next week's schedule because Revolution is on Sunday next week.
Sunday night, we may have to.
Usually AEW pay-per-views are on Saturday, so we need to talk off the air about that.
Maybe all right, for that. You all need to get out of here because Doug and I got some conferencing to do.
Take care, everybody.